When somebody tells me that they don't see race, I say, I mean, that's fine. You know, you can choose not to see the sky, but it exists.
I mean, race has always been important in America. It's always been with us. And we went through a period with the election of Barack Obama where some felt that we were entering a post-racial space. We clearly are not post-racial. We clearly are at a point where we have a lot of issues around race and identity that we have to deal with. For all of these systems that we have that allow us to allegedly communicate in a more robust way, we are more divided in terms of how we actually interact with each other. There are fewer, it seems, tethers that allow us to peek into someone else's life and understand their point of view. Race is something that's not easy for people to talk about.
When I ask people, why is it so hard to have conversations across the color line about race, there are two common responses. From whites, afraid to say the wrong thing. From people of color, exhaustion. Holding space for transformation gives you a way to have conversations across the color line without getting exhausted and without being overcome by fear. Neona Spans defines holding space for transformation as being unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. And in my book, I add, while standing in the ground of your values for justice, inclusion, or whatever they might be.
It is extremely frustrating to not be able to have these kind of open conversations where it's like, we are, as a community, afraid of the police.
Yeah.
And because that is not your experience, what we're saying is invalid.
Yeah.
And it's not fair. And you have to wonder if a whole collection of people are concerned about a group of people that you think are there to protect you, something is up.
Yeah.
Something has to be up. And even if after having a conversation you still don't believe or feel, at least give us the respect to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
I was attempting to discuss race in white-dominated circles and really getting nowhere. I wrote a blog post. I titled it, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Let's say we were having a broad conversation about inequality. As soon as I tried to raise the topic of race, there was an almost immediate clampdown, shutdown, denial from my conversation partner. They tried to find ways to convince me that absolutely no, race had nothing to do with it, that actually I had a chip on my shoulder. I'd actually decided to have a conversation with a person who I can now confidently say probably is a white anti-racist, a white critical anti-racist. And I spoke to her about her journey and I said, well, what's led to you being somebody who is so aware of how race shapes inequality? She said that a lot of her defensiveness initially when it came to these conversations about race was a fear of being wrong, you know, a fear of, she said a lot of it was to do with her ego, a fear of being implicated in existing inequalities, a fear that she actually wasn't doing enough. I know that I have not spoken out in the past for fear of losing a job or losing a friend or losing a space in a house share. Because when you discuss race in the conversation, you become the troublemaker, you become the problem.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in a 1968 speech where he reflects upon the civil rights movement, states, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. As a teacher, I've internalized this message. Every day all around us, we see the consequences of silence manifest themselves in the form of discrimination, violence, genocide, and war.
Most people don't change based on facts. They change based on feelings, stories, and human connection. So for conversations about race to be productive, we need more than an open mind. We need a whole new context, the context of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance.
Race is one of those touchy subjects you don't really want to get into because you're afraid you might mess up. But the fact is that as early as 3 years old, children are classifying people based on their appearances. And so the worst conversation adults can have with kids about race is no conversation at all. Kids, just like adults, don't just respond to words. So this isn't just quote unquote talking to your kids about race. This is actually experiential learning that we need to do. I remember taking a class to the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated. And when young people see that, that impacts them. And then we can use that experience, that hands-on, visceral encounter with race and racism to have a much more substantive conversation, and it feels different.
Silence is the residue of fear. It is feeling your flaws gut-wrench guillotine your tongue. It is the air retreating from your chest because it doesn't feel safe in your lungs. Silence is Rwandan genocide. Silence is Katrina. It is what you hear when there aren't enough body bags left. It is the sound after the noose is already tied. It is charring. It is chains. It is privilege. It is pain. There is no time to pick your battles when your battles have already picked you. I will not let silence wrap itself around my indecision. I will